let's talk about In the Cage, A Guide to Sigil by Wolfgang Baur and Rick Swan. This is a 1995 Planescape module, relatively early on in the run, though because it's... I need to check exactly what it was, but as it reuses a lot of Ned Dameron plates from early adventures, it may come just at the end of that. You could probably check the conspectus for that. It's 128 pages, and it is the city book for Sigil. There is a very short guide to Sigil in the Planescape box set, but this is the kind of real deal. There's a separate Faces of Sigil NPC guide with lots of other stuff going on in it. But this is it. This is the city book, and I think it's an interesting insight into a lot of things about Planescape as a product, also as a setting, into TSR at the time, and into city adventure, city product design decisions, which they're different. I've got some other city adventures here to compare. It's organised very rationally and reasonably. It's got an intro, a Tout's Guide to Sigil, and then it has 5 chapters on the 6 wards, and 2 of the wards of the Guildhall and Market are so merged and similar that they're given one chapter. And each of these chapters of the wards has an overview of the ward, and then it has usually a page or 2, and then many locations. There is a lot, and this should correctly remind people of some great West End Games D6 Star Wars products. There's lots of in-world posters, and that's prime exotic creatures from the prime material plane make great pets or great eating. You've got that is a Ned Dameron full colour plate, which we've looked at in the Eternal Boundary review I did last week. A notice of criminal indictment, and there are some keys. I can't get focus. There we go. Which I will touch on. There's prices, price lists. There's excerpts from books. There's lots of it in character stuff. By the way, that's something which I would just largely say I think was good. I will touch on it more as I go, but that's a strength. Sigil is, in one version of Planescape, Sigil is almost the whole campaign. Everything is in Sigil, and virtually everything is in Sigil, and virtually everything is about the factions. I think this is a poor take on Planescape, not because you can't have lots of that stuff, but because there's so much more. The idea you've got the whole planes to travel, and the idea that you're using the planes simply as a backdrop against which to do this other thing seems limiting. But it certainly is an iconic city with the sort of Dickensian London poverty, a very grim aspect. It's always raining, it's always cold. Even the nice bits of town are a bit grim. Like, it's quite a dystopic place. It's like a China Mieville city or something. A city full of China Mievilles as well would probably be similarly dystopic. But yes, so it's an iconic setting. It's got distinct feel and distinct aesthetic, and this book, I think, captures a lot of that. I think it is basically undermined seriously by kind of layout writing issues in a way that means it ends up comparing very poorly to its competitors in the city supplement field. It's not an adventure per se. It's not kind of a single story over 32 pages or 64 pages, whatever it is, a whole city book. So it should be compared to those books perhaps rather than to dedicated adventures. So to get going, the general standard of internal art is, as you kind of expect from Planescape, depending on what you like. The light is really bad today, sorry. There, it is very nice. Lots of art, lots of couple of pages later you get one of these, the in-character sheets. That is the log of portals. You got a limited portal map there. It's technically set out. There's a nice detail-itsy a couple of pages on, of a guy on a sedan chair. It's set out as if there are, and it says this is the case, player sections, and then the dark, which is in a smaller text, slightly, is it? I think it's in the same font, but smaller text, differently laid out. There's the dark, there's the normal text. As if the dark were the secret DM stuff. I'll address it now because there's no point picking it up in any detail. Is that this just doesn't work. One, because they are boxed in. So if you want to do that technique in the same book, do the Deadlands thing where you have posse territory, no man's land, which is with DM permission, and martial, like the Marshal's Guide or whatever it's called, martial law stuff, which is the secrets of the setting. Separate it completely, or see it in terms of like typically with adventures, just the DM reads it and gives the information you want. If you're creating a player's thing, and you have this the Planescape original box set, Birthright, Dark Sun. I mean, Dark Sun, I think both books are actually for the player. Or indeed Astromundi Cluster for Spelljammer. There are books for players and there's books for the DM. The Tapani sector for Star Wars D6. But here, it's just all interleaved, and it's also not even like it makes sense that you've got the dark stuff is all the mechanics for the game and the secrets of the story. It's also, there's constantly just secrets being explained halfway through a longer section on an area. It'll be like, the real dark of it is this. You're like, well, it's not the dark because it's not in the other section, but it is because you're just telling the players the secret of something the DM might not want them to know. There are a few things in there which are more questionable, like character stats for NPCs, which I guess is fine. But it's something when the layout, there's already a sign of confusion that no one has picked up that this is a bad way to lay out a game book. And of course, this is because the real problem we find is that this isn't primarily meant as a game book. It can be used as a game book. I use it as a game book, but you're somewhat going against its design. It's a bit like, there's a spectrum from reading Conan the Barbarian or whatever it is, Blood in the Mist, and say, I get inspiration from this, I'll draw this element, versus kind of something that's just stats on the other end, and then many books in between. But this is much more towards this is just fiction side of it, and you've got to mine stuff out, even though there's a lot to mine out. So the introduction has descriptions of stuff. One thing in general is that you get a very variable amount of text as well due to the art. You have stuff about Razorvine, how Razorvine works. You've got some stats for early on. You actually get a couple of bits of stats. Sigil, wildlife. You get a few other interesting Plains animals in it. Razorvine. But then a lot of it is like stuff about the architecture, stuff about mazes, the punishment sectors created by like sub-demi-planes created by the Lady of Pain, the strange power who rules Sigil, portals, and there's stuff throughout this. This is one thing. It's 2-column, and you've got a lot of stuff just going through. Some of which is pseudo-mechanical, some of which is in-world mechanics, as in like the rates you can get, the kind of interest the interest rate cap on loans, and how debt works. Rules about thin air, if you're not used to it, because of the thin air, because Sigil's so high up in the plane of concordant opposition. Technically, like, is it infinitely high up? And throughout this, there's useful stuff, but it all expands and goes on for ages. There are some useful tables, the headquarters, details about the factions. I think basically the problem with the factions at a campaign level is there are like 16, and you've got to get your players into them somehow. And you see advice, quite good advice, where people just say, just introduce them to like 3 to start with. But this opens up the fact that it's very expansive and demanding, and it's not very open to players, because players don't start up being able to make decisions for the factions. They're much more mission givers than anything else to begin with. And that's not that completely illegitimate, but to make a campaign about that removes a lot of agency from characters deciding between options, or can do. It's got rules about hirelings, technically, sedan chairs, light boys, couriers, touts. That's about 3 pages of 2 columns, but again, just everything is, you've got like couriers is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs of, medium-sized text, several sentences there on those 6 paragraphs. It's a lot of information, and you've got to filter it down to make it useful. It's flavourful, but this points towards the fact that this is written strongly in the kind of novelistic direction. Wolfgang, it's interesting because Rick Swan I associate with decent products, Wolfgang Baur with bad products, and I think you might reasonably see this as being something partly to do with Baur, that this is so overwritten. Maybe I'm being harsh, but that's my experience of TSR products, is that Swan is not normally this bad. But yeah, it's something you find with a variety of Planescape products. It reaches its apogee, or rather nadir, with what some people are like, it's the best of the modules, and it's the most expensive, certainly, of the modules for Planescape, Dead Gods, where you're just kind of centred around the universe, Giovanni Chronicle style, if you know your Vampire the Masquerade. Just to watch stuff happen is probably better than Giovanni Chronicle, but it's it's a fair comparison. That it's essentially something a bit like it's not. Is it Die Vecna Die as well? Is that the one? The idea that there's just large sections where you, or is it Vecna Lives? When it's Vecna Lives, I think, where there's just large sections where you don't do anything, or you just do a very minor thing, and players are having their agency robbed. And this, I think the fact that Planescape has this trend, which is matching it up against, because it's released, is it 94 is the box set? It's released in a changing RPG economic ecosystem where people are buying, particularly the stalwarts of the 80s are less important in terms of the market share, so which tend to be quite crunchy, like MERP or Traveller or whatever, and certainly like AD&D, particularly earlier first edition AD&D, and more the market is these very story-driven, very artistically attractive, beautifully put together books from White Wolf particularly, but it becomes a trend elsewhere, and this does come through with the issue of this also is where Metaplot comes from, which is what Dead Gods ends up being, and other stuff like Faction War. The Adventure Faction War. Deadlands really leans into that with its most famous trilogy of adventures from the original Weird West game, ending up revealing the potential dark alternate timeline future where the bad guys win, Hell on Earth, which connects to the other future game, Lost Colony. So just this kind of very, very, you buy this product to get this product, and you don't know the secrets. You're told you'll get the secrets in the future. And so you realise that the thing where you're telling the players a bunch of secrets and it doesn't matter, and in fact a separate thing is, a particularly bad example of this is, and I'll skip ahead to this now, a big monster in one of the 6 districts, so in one of the 5 other chapters, the Cadix, which doesn't have any stats. There's a few others that would say, what will actually happen with this, who knows? What's the cause of this? Who knows? Sometimes it says what the cause of the thing is, and it says it in the main text, and sometimes it refuses to tell you, but it hints that maybe it'll come up in the future. Sometimes it doesn't do that at all either. And this makes it impossible to run as a product as is. You can't be like, well, okay, I'll do this, or it's pointing me towards this specific thing I need to go and check. It's just saying maybe we'll tell you in the future, buy more books. This is fairly common. So you've got this highly overwritten structure layout. You've got a lot of stuff in it being directly unusable, and the other meta complaint is, though there are some useful tables, basically there's virtually never enough summary. There aren't any summaries of shops. There aren't any summaries of locations, index locations, or anything like that. I'll make some comparisons at the end of the video to that, but this all makes it much harder to use as a city product. And the reason this matters is because city adventures, by that I mean just the city campaign, you're in a city a lot or you have to go around, rely on far more locations and far more NPCs than do, I think, Dungeon or Wilderness adventures. Those two kinds of adventures you can prepare for in a very different way. For a dungeon, you prepare the level, don't you? Pretty much. If you want to read something, you'll hear people told, advice, fairly common advice, just read the top level, try to kind of think about what's happening in the immediate rooms they're going to come into. Maybe that's good prep. the wilderness adventure is not dissimilar, partly because it's often node-based, point-based, in practice at least, so just go here, do that. There's some encounter tables for in between. Here, there's two things. There are virtually no summaries of stuff that is useful. There's a few things like the faction headquarters and stuff, and there's virtually no mechanics to support going around doing anything. There is one set of potential encounters for an area, but no probabilities on it, no number appearing on it necessarily. Just kind of here's some stuff that could happen, and that's constant throughout. It's just a complete lack of infrastructure to support an adventure where, because players can go anywhere in a very densely populated area with lots of options, you end up either having to massively limit their information so you can just learn a couple of things, so they can just go to one place learned and prepped, or you have to do all the work yourself. And I have a bit of a game in Sigil at the moment, which I started doing stuff for, but I realise, having looked at this again, I'm like, how much more I need to prepare for it. How much I started by actually doing the whole limit it to one area. You can do that, limit to one ward. But as soon as players start saying, well, I'm interested in this or this within a few sessions, usually, you're going to have to know the whole city, and then you're going to have to realise, I need to know all the publicly well-known portals to the planes. I need to know, I can make up stuff like any of us can make up, oh, there's a shop where you can buy this, or you don't need to know the detail of the shop. That's fine. But any interesting shops you need to have a very good knowledge of and summary of across all the city, because anywhere that might be well known if they ask about something. And there are alternatives for different things. So there's lots of stuff that isn't summed up that needs to be. There's a general lack of indices as well. There is a one-page index of just topic titles and NPCs, and a few locations, not loads. The other thing is there is a good-ish, I'd say better than the original box set map of Sigil, with, it's keyed. It's not indexed. It doesn't have any coordinates, so it couldn't be indexed separately. It is at a very, very rough sort of scale, which I don't think actually is on it. I don't think it's actually scaled here, is it? You can sort of abstract it because you can walk across Sigil in a day, as it were. You don't necessarily have to. I guess you couldn't walk across it by definition, but yeah, you could walk around a lot of it in a day. So there's some stuff you can abstract there, but basically, again, it's not perfect, but it is usable and decent, and I will use that. I use that in game when I have people in Sigil, so there's no problem with the basic usability, even if it's not perfect. What is a partial redemption here? And it is a significant partial redemption. That I've said there's promise here, and I've listed lots of problems, but I should say there's a bunch of stuff in here which is good. The problem is that it is mired in this very overwritten and non-intuitively organised, non-helpfully organised product. It is useful to know about how people get around. It is useful because that's thematic and has a good feel and directly should connect to the probabilities of encounters, things like that. All the sorts of things that would matter normally for players. And it's good to have some stuff on the Lady of Pain, even if it's not very much. It's the in world stuff, like the posters and stuff. I've used some of them, are great. And within each of the wards, this is maybe the bigger thing, is within each of the wards there tend to be, like, if you want, and this is a big thing about City Adventures as well, but also about the general planar campaign we really should be aiming for with Planescape, is there are dozens of hooks here, useful hooks, good hooks, things you can do, things that players would be interested in. They're not set out in any useful way most of the time. You just go, you read through, you find something, you go, oh, okay, I can do that. But to create the rumour table, or to create options at least, you've got to read the whole thing. If you're preparing it into a rumour table, you then have to abstract the information. This is a failure. It's another small criticism. It's small in the sense that by now I'm past caring, but you see, you've got maps here. This is a map of a pub in the ladies' ward, the first richest ward, closely associated with the buildings of government. Who knows where the lady lives, but that's where most of the governmental buildings are. And a thing that you gain no detail about in here, but you do in the game Planescape Torment, is there is, under Sigil, presumably on the outside, inside layers of the donut. So, as it were, on the outside of Sigil rather than on the inside. But yeah, on the underneath Sigil, the city, is the catacombs where presumably the Darbus live. Presumably there are many secrets. And a place you can get into that is via the catacombs and the 12 factoles. And you go down and there's a entrance hall, and then there's another place. There's basically, there's 3 halls you can go through, and different things could be available in each of them theoretically. And then you can go to the 12 factoles hall, and which is where the original factoles of the city are, of the 12 factions who matter at the time, I guess, are located. And then you can go through the storage vaults into the catacombs. I mean, there are 2 things. One, this map itself, though it's perfectly pleasant, you're not going to do anything in any of these rooms, so it's just taking up an entire page for no reason. There's no map of the catacombs, on the other hand, or no sample, no encounter lists. Again, that's common. Another... this one could theoretically matter if you end up with, in like the Best of White Dwarf Volume 1, there's like a bar fight mini game. If you end up with a bar fight, this is a much more useful bar fight map, because it, place where you can go through the inn and the street level of the Fortunes Wheel, the Golden Barrier Inn. The fact that there's all these different inns actually with all kinds of different personalities, that's a strength in itself. The fact there's so many places to go. Again, you're on the table summarising them, but that they are flavourful and good. Again, useless half-page map of the Temple of the Abyss with... you could use it for a fight, but you're not going to have a fight there because you're going to die. You're level 10 and you're dying there, basically. Probably, anyway. Given that the Serpent Griffin golems are HD 15, Thaco 5, AC -1 with Mesmerized Shatterblades and immune to mental attacks. It's crazy. You don't need a map for that. And there's no secrets there. There's nothing that you're going to be describing to the players in terms of their dungeon experience, which is what you use gridded maps for. Complete misunderstanding of what they're there for. You do get stats for one thing, the Worm of the Mercy Killers, who's a local breed, a planar breed of Wyvern. So yeah, the Ladies' Ward has a few ideas in terms of interesting locations and interesting characters. People, as I said, there's often missions like the dwarf or potential jobs. The dwarves who are interested in some of their stuff back in Kryn, there in the Ladies' Ward, for instance, or the jester of the lady, Jeremo the Natterer, who's really angling to gain more and more power, and has lots of and wants to his faction to become one of the main factions of Sigil. Is currently not the Ring Givers. There's some interesting stuff there. I feel like there must be a quest somewhere, another quest somewhere around here. Some stuff about the courts, which again, implicitly there's ways of getting players involved, and the description of the courts and the kind of highly bribable, corrupt system. It's very Roman court style system with advocates and stuff. The judges and their eccentricities. This is all very flavourful, and there is a section about law and punishment in Sigil and the kinds of punishments that happen. The problem, of course, again being there's little help in tying players into it. This one, there possibly actually are fewer quests on. The biggest quest really hinted at is getting into the catacombs via the 12 factoles. The lower ward, the next ward, the industrial ward, which again has decent. It does have a mechanic for smog, which is good, much like the air one. It has a few different ideas going on. The bones, or is it the Bones of the Night? Is that the one? Yeah, where there's a cavern complex in the foul-smelling region of this place. The salon is richly decorated with the grave goods of 100,000 wealthy debtors. The Master of Bones is this one guy. who negotiates a fee for basically a library of skulls. He can, he's speaking to this army of dead to find out. The dead are experienced, knowledgeable, and unable to lie. He can find out stuff for you, and he will pay prices for skulls of the dead. And he has allied were-rats and a stone golem. Again, it's a basically useless dungeon map. It is theoretically, almost for the first time, I was thinking you might use me. The focus there is terrible. There we go. Get the light right, more or less. More or less the first map that's going to matter like that. And it does connect it to the ditch and the stuff like this waterway, the only waterway in Sigil. And the were-rats also gather along the ditch, so you've got these sort of connections between these things. That's fun. That feels gameable. It also feels very Lankmarish or whatever. You can do more of it with that. Then you've got more places, more Elven Mill. You've got some. You get stuff about the shattered Temple of Eoscar, where the Athar, the godless, are the lost, are located, and some stuff behind Eoscar and his astral corpse. Not many details beyond that, but there we are. Again, pretty par for the course. It's an idea. You get an idea. Harbinger House is a cool, run by the Godsmen, like insane asylum. There's an adventure called Harbinger House, which isn't necessarily well rated. Take it or leave it, I guess. But in this, you're not getting many details of it. You just get the couple of paragraphs. Lots of ale houses listed. Again, which I think is basically good, but you need to have hooks into them, and it'd be better to have a list. Some of it is pretty basic, basic information. Food and drink are of average quality but cheap. They have a bit of a brawl, fights them all the way to Baur, entertainment for everyone. That's the Red Pony. A place where tieflings and succubi go. The Sword and Buckler, where you get lots of mercenaries. That's usable, and that's usable certainly within a city context. And you don't get any stats or any information. You don't get henchman lists in these things. That does compare badly with some other city supplements, the better kind. Then we go to the clerk's wards, which is the other kind of governmental section, and there's some nice bits, but one thing. So I quite like this. There's this one place run by a halfling. Her husband is dead. He was an adventurer. He died, but she has this supply of green gauge cider, which is made from apples from Sheila Perry-Royal's realm. And it has the dark, which is the dark right next to the, there's the dark, there's the normal text. Again, useless, isn't it? Saying, yes, actually, this is a repayment of a sacrifice or the accomplishment of her dead husband in rediverting what is here called the Great Modron Parade, the Great Modron March, from destroying some of the vineyards. Oh, that's good. This is a very Deadlandsy one, actually. Grundlethrum's automatic scribe. There's a human who's got an automatic basically dictaphone but transcribes as well. Speech to text, but better. But actually, there's a ghost in the machine. There is a lesser power from the abysses in it, beginning to do funny things and destabilize stuff. This is a way a power has slipped into Sigil. That's an interesting plot point, but of course, there's a hint of you could do something with that, but there's no more development of it. So again, you have this an idea, but either it's there for the meta plot or it's a throwaway and you can make an adventure. But there's so many words elsewhere that you could cut that why not put them into just having some adventures? There's the weird serial killer, the Scratcher, smiley wizard who kills people he thinks are wasting because he thinks he is the entire universe. He's a strict solipsist. So that's something. It is a whole page. It does have a major. That's another piece of reused art there. A whole stat block with lots of his complex spells and stuff. So that kind of works. Here's another bit of dark red tape that's useful. Again, overwritten, but telling you how you when you have to go to the Hall of Information to get all the kind of information that they could possibly store from across the planes. Big Candlekeep library thing here. What's the process and how difficult is it? And on this page, you have an essentially useless map again. But on this page, you have summaries of all the bureaus and departments in the Hall of Records, or the Hall of Information, sorry, and the costs if there is a processing cost. And there's lots of that. That's actually really useful. Obviously, there's not loads you're going to do with that, but it is going to come up semi-regularly. You know, players are going to want to research stuff. They're going to know it's a place they could go, so having the procedure down is helpful. The Hall of Records is different, but it has details about the vault, including the password, the fact the password has part of it, one of the three phrases has leaked out, and the things that might be stored there. That's good. Here's a plot in the Clerk's Ward. Gina Ely is a planar explorer who's written books about all kinds of stuff, both in Sigil and in the planes, but she's getting old and she needs people to do stuff for her. With particular things, she's writing about the River Styx and the creatures of the Beastlands. She anticipates hiring a team of skilled professionals to work on these projects. There's a hook there. There's no prices. There's no kind of like, this is what we'll pay, but it's a good idea. I don't know that you need to read 128 pages to get that quality of hook, though. Again, the same problem arises. Similarly, Tensar's employment service, it gives 3 job examples with retainer prices. Travel exterminators needed in limbo to hunt red slardy, carriers needed to go across the plains, and Arboreal expedition, ruin excavation in Pelion, underwater mapping in Ossa. So that's useful and functional. There's the Traptic Nicopona, which 3-eyed Nicopona, which has portals to the Prime, Elysium, and Mount Celestia. But you need to learn the passwords to use them and get past the guards. That feels very slightly kind of fiddly, but it's a hook. Certainly, if there's like, and this is the kind of thing that I'd perfectly happily put in. You say, okay, you need to get to Mount Celestia, to this place, but Mount Celestia gates are rare, or portals are rare, perhaps they are, and this is to a particular location. It's the most efficient way, and this is the 2 things you need, or the 3 things, because there's a fetch quest. You need to have a chunk of you need to have the same size gem as the eye that you want to go to, which corresponds to one of these platforms at the bottom, which is how you get there. You then need the password, so you have that, and you also have to find the password, and also get past the Doomguard guards. That's fun, that's viable. It doesn't set it up as a quest, but that's kind of okay in that case. You know, it's a general amenity, and you can imagine that should, within the context of the city adventure, be fine for you as the DM to work on. Ironically, despite not being the single most amazing thing, that for 2 paragraphs and an explanatory drawing is one of the best laid out and most functional bits in the entire book. Guildhall and Market Wards is actually pretty good. It again somewhat is absurdly overwritten, like you semi-regularly get stories being told to explain a setting or a place that you're in. And they're kind of okay, though they also may remind you of the fiction in, particularly in World of Darkness, some of which, by the way, is actually quite good. But I now look at them like, again, you've got page usage here to set the scene, but how much is it really contributing to you ending up being able to play the game and have a good campaign? That's the discussion, I guess. But yeah, there's plenty of stories, and you do sometimes lose a couple of pages at a time to a story. You do get like a price list for something that's usable in game. There's fun stuff. It's not, again, it's art. If you see it as art that has an in-game use, it's much more forgivable than if you say this is meant to be one of the main handouts and resources. It's a limited handout. Some of them are quite good, some of them are limited, but it's decent as a hybrid between art and handout. The problem is if when you realise this is a lot of what the effort has gone into, that you think, well, I kind of want other stuff instead. As I think about it, actually, Guildhall and Market Ward might be the best chapter, or one of them, without avoiding some of the issues. But it tends to have a few more hooks. It tends to have some sort of slightly more direct do this for this And then again, the Clerks one had a bit of that. I wonder if you got a division between authors here, if Swan and Baur took different ones, and if this is not a Swan chapter. You know, controversial perhaps, but that's my guess. An interesting thing with this one is that it has a look around with a bunch of stuff that you could do fairly quickly. Sightseeing, I think you might go and see stuff, and organisations, guilds in the guild hall. Shopping in the market ward actually gives procedures for buying stuff, which says what it gives examples. Player's handbook items are all there, and the DM is encouraged to supplement these lists with whole other items in other D&D supplements. Aurora's Whole Realms catalogue is a good resource, etc. Payment, earnest money, down payments of stuff, credit, then promotional flyers, which, to be fair, that's not really super necessary. Another pub map, the bronze bezants. That's the point. There is an example of this is. This is kind of cute. A puzzle folder which you can turn into a story or an advert or whatever. That's kind of cute. Loans at affordable rates at the bronze bezants, which includes procedure for getting a loan and again, it's that's useful to have any kind of procedure, and again, it's summed up fairly quickly. It's a half a column. Chirpers, which is a really posh place with the Seawind Theatre there as well, and it does give a kind of hook, so that the were-rats are going to try to steal the skulls at Chirpers for their master, obviously, or for their ally. And they're switching stuff. They've switched 3. But yes, the fact that that's that you could get dragged into. Again, that's a hook. It's an interesting hook. There's no real extra work put in. Ensign's discount elixirs is great. He just sells kind of cheap, very limited magic. So, for instance, limited healing, 30 GP a dose, which does, again, there's mechanics, but the mechanics, by the way, are not in the dark. They're just in the main thing. Limited, I guess, it's maybe fine for players to know, but 1d6 points of damage for a potion of limited healing for 50 GP a dose. I mean, given that's, on average 1 point less of healing than a potion of healing, that's pretty good for 30 GP a dose. Albeit he only has 1 dose per the flyer. The flyer, I've used this flyer in a game. That's one. Small animal control, blue hue, drowning resistance, limited invisibility. Some stuff about the Great Bazaar and the Great Gymnasium. Here is a usable, gameable thing. Debtors list. People you might need to bounty hunt. List of what Barturian green steel weapons cost. That's useful. This is about the best chapter. Xanis inventions, things he might make. Not necessarily as useful, but kind of fun. There's a couple there. The distance recorder and the canary release. A couple of different things that you could do stuff with, technically. Taxidermist at Zach's corpse curing, and then you get the hive ward. So that's one thing. The book is at its best where it is just like each location. This Guildhall and the Guildhall and Market tend to be slightly shorter locations, which is itself good. More of the handouty kind of posters are gameable, like the debtors list, and there's more mechanics. Basically, that's when it's at its best, which is not surprising. The hive ward is the slums. It has this. I like these in-game things. You can see the color difference there. These are from a book by the lady who is wanting to pay for explorers now that she's too old. When she did an expose on the hive, and it's really miserable and horrible, and and the feeling of this kind of like that stuff like this was written about London in the 18th or 19th century. Into the early 20th century, even, particularly but basically, as you see urbanisation happen, but here it's in this permanent limbo of misery, and it's reasonably effective. This scene setting. The one thing it lacks, though, for that is that you don't actually get lots of stuff to do. You get ooze portals or puddles, which might drag you into the elemental plane of ooze. So and it kind of gives some rough rules about them, but also says that everyone can just decide where they are or when they do stuff. But yeah, it gives rules to them. It has procedures for using them. Again, has a mostly redundant map of a location you might go to. This is a boxing arena where you can earn access to a portal, though it's not clear if this is being used as a way of trying to kill you if you win or not. It's a really tough battle versus a Cyclops kin. Again, that's usable, that's quite thematic, but it feels like a marginal thing. What you're going to do is, because Cyclops kin is HD 5, Thaco 15, and it has 2 1d4 plus 4 attacks. So you're going to want to have a level 7 or 8 fighter, basically, who therefore, who can, particularly well with strength. I guess technically a 5th level fighter may, HP wise, he's got 39 HP, so yeah, you're going to need to be like, often 7th level or something to really make sure you've got the right stuff and you can reliably win. But yeah, you set that up so that you need access to this portal, so you have to go into this very dangerous underground fighting arena. There we are. There's procedures for faking documents via a particular guy. There's again, maybe this is the good guy, maybe I'm guessing Rick Swan. Rules about what horse, and cheap animals and stuff, much like Ensign's elixirs, and information about the secret markings, saying what kind, including a handout of samples they might be able to find, your players might be able to find. Someone has put up an explanation of some of them, of the underground thieves' canty, kind of like use of noughts and crosses to mark out the secret or illegal businesses that are being run from a location. Then there's the fairly rubbish summary of the big monster in the slags, the Cadix, after a slightly overlong description of the blood war incursion that caused the slags. Then you do get, this is something, again, where you get a concentrated section of a couple of pages of mechanics encounters in the slags. It does give like 1d4 plus 1 Vargues, or an earthquake, 2d4 dretches, or a prime vortex. There's no table on this, and there's no probability on this. It's what it says. Every 2 days, a party spends in the slags. Be fair. Members should also experience at least one of the following special encounters. They may also encounter Cadix. See the entry elsewhere. So to be fair, there is a procedure. It's a very weak procedure. Every 2 days. At what point? Who cares? You also there's kind of very vague links to where you'd go into this kind of wasteland within the slums. What does it say exactly? It says, why would they risk it? 2 reasons. One, they're vulnerable to the prime material, and 2, there's emergency caches which could have very good stuff in them, so people go to hunt it, or they're hiding out, I guess is the other reason. And so the second one is Tanari supply caches from the Blood War incursion, which it's presumed that each has a trap, or you can use the table to determine if there's a trap, which gives a 5 in 6 chance of some kind of trap, which are kind of interesting. One is that it begins to shrink away. One is that it kind of becomes lightning trapped, but that dissipates. One is that it's actually not a cache, it's a permanently polymorphed Vargu. And then the cache contents, there's a 1 in 3 chance there's nothing in it, which is probably too high given the risk, the risk and the fact you're going to have to search for it. And if you turn this into a meaningful kind of encounter table with other stuff that you might encounter there, because it must be that there's higher chance than 1 every 2 days. You'd think in that kind of thing you're going to be checking every hour or 2. So you need a bigger encounter table. But yeah, the cache contents can go all the way up to 1 to 2 magical rings, or 1 to 4 obsidian flasks with elixirs in them, or 1,000 gold piece worth each black opal stones used for a Tanari sling. That's good. And it's nice actually to have gold values on these things, though it's not supporting gold for XP, but the fact it points you towards how you could. So there are some good stuff in there. It's still kind of, again, as a major adventure locale, it's kind of under-supported. It's interesting, if we take my multiple scribes thesis and cut it up and say that, Clerks in Guildhall and Hive are by the same person. Clerks in Guildhall has a lot of interactive stuff and negotiation. The Hive has a couple of adventure locations, but which are not laid out like adventure locations in a useful way. They don't have much information. This is better than the catacombs in under the ladies' ward, where there's no information. but it's still struggling from being like, they're not telling you really how to make sure you can run an encounter well, not really giving you much information about what else is in the slags, not really. Even the supply caches feel like they've not been tested in any way, which seems perfectly likely, really. No listed playtesters, which is not surprising. They do thank Rich Baker and Colin McComb, Bill Slavacek and Ray Valisi, and certainly Baker and McComb at least are both very good second edition designers. Slavacek, more complex legacy, I think. So yes, finally there's the Weary Spirit Infirmary, which is set up much more like an adventure location you could do stuff with. There is a 3-story map, albeit it's not very interesting, and there's lots of stuff about it's a dark bedlam. You know, you can go there for free healthcare. You can also go to the Bleak Cabal's headquarters for free healthcare, it turns out, but free healthcare that is scientific, not magical, because the guy who runs it doesn't like magical healing. But it's dark science. He's crazy. He's a crank. He's a quack. He doesn't know what he's doing. So that's fun. And you might need to rescue someone. And it gives details of the kinds of people who are there, the different rooms, the different procedures, some other stuff that can happen. You know, I'm not going to sniff at that too much. I think that's a functional one. But again, there's not lots going on there. There's not lots of treasure listing, for instance. You'd only go there to rescue someone and escape, or maybe kill the guy Tetch who runs it, who's a bleaker, isn't he? He is to be fair, though his spells don't track, he's technically an 18th level illusionist. He only has 5th level spells, so whatever is going on there. But yeah, so you do have a stat line, you do know the people who help him, but I don't want to sniff too much. It still requires you to read through, you know, it's still 1, 2, 3, 4 pages, 2 columns each, with a kind of very vague, not particularly interesting map, no treasure listings, and no stronger hooks other than that someone might have gone missing it, and you know you might need to look there. So yeah, I think my conclusion about the book is there's lots of atmosphere, sometimes too much atmosphere. There's a bunch of hooks, there's some useful ideas, but it all needs to be boiled down and abstracted. And some of it, for instance, portal ideas, you could probably come up with yourself by making up your own sigil. So you don't, in that sense, the idea that it's helpful, but as they're not abstracted, is not really that helpful. You have to still go and find all the random ideas they've come up with. The hooks tend to be solid, if not amazing. There's some very fun shops, some very fun NPCs. It is basically, though I think it is, unless you want to write your own sigil, it's probably a really important book to run most Planescape campaigns with. It is flawed enough that I think, you know, there is a degree of caveat emptor about it that you need to know that you're putting in work to make it work. What I'm going to do quickly at the end now is just say, probably for only a couple of minutes, there are lots of other city supplements. I'll only look at some other TSR ones. Well, actually, old school AD&D ones. But you could look at Fever Dreaming Marlinko, or by Chris Kutelik, which I've reviewed on the channel, or Backlin Jewel of the Seas with the Night Table, 2 different pamphlets from EMDP by Gabalux. You're kind of meant to use the Night Table. Is that what it's called, the Night Table? As the encounter tables for Backlin when you're using it as a environment you're constantly living in and going around. Those are good new school ones. But TSR and other, old school publishers did know how to make a city supplement once upon a time. And the evidence is, say, for Waterdeep, these are both first edition. That's 1987. I think the City System is first edition too, is it? 88. These two are the first Waterdeep books. And this is, the Waterdeep book has long keyed details, including, which usually have a format involving procedures as well as description for every location that is keyed by number onto this map. And there are also 7 adventures, 7 adventure outlines, which are a couple of paragraphs long each, and there is There are lists of selected non-player characters, tricks for starting a campaign, albeit that is literally a page there. The guilds and factions of the cities over 10 pages, so factions are abstracted out. City system does similar stuff. Mostly this system is 12 maps, each of which maps a section of the city, plus detailed maps of key buildings within. So, for instance, Merle's Mansion, or the Madhouse, or the Dragon's Head Tavern, Spires of the Morning Temple. So you've got lots, which you can also use for other buildings in any campaign. And it has lots of encounter tables, both city buildings and services, and then street scenes, which are the beginning of the encounter tables, and recurring rules about creating stats for scenic characters, recurrent situations, pickpockets. It has a ton of procedural stuff. So even just this, you can comfortably run Waterdeep. But together, between the two, you know, not that is. I mean, it would have been $25, probably $23 in late 80s money, so not cheap. This was $15 mid 90s, so you can see this is twice the price of this, I grant, but this is cheaper even with inflation by that point, and this is a much more systematic book. City State of the Invincible Overlord has, it has the maps with key, and each row just has a list in table form of NPCs and shops. So between the two, you can flick quickly to discover stuff there. In any of these, none of these are perfect for these purposes, but just for the usability aspect, that's Judges Guild, of course. People knew what they're doing. Rock of Baur, which I've reviewed before on this channel, from '92, so only 3 years beforehand, has a keyed map with full keyed list. You can see the text there, and that translates to a numbered list in here, as well as separate sections on guilds and guilds and orders. It has a list of NPCs, and it has other rules and stuff in the history. And this is less good in terms of, it's less focused, not less good. In some ways, it's so flavoursome and works so well. There's so many things going on that I don't want to put it too far below Waterdeep. It probably is less good than FR1 Waterdeep, though. But it still has a lot of those good things going on. And then, final example, City of Greyhawk by Carl Sargent. The official City of Greyhawk, I think the only version created. There's a Gazetteer, which is okay. It has random encounters, which with specific locations in it, which are keyed to the region map you get. It has a city key and stuff as well. That's not necessarily the most exciting one in the world, but it works. And then it has a folks, feuds and factions thing, which is economics, politics, guilds, etc. And then it ends up with several adventure outlines. It doesn't just have that. I know this is a box set, which was running at $18 in 1989. So, yes, it is more expensive than, again, it's pushing twice the price, not quite, probably, with inflation than in the cage. But nonetheless, it has 23, as well as the adventures in the book, it has 23 mini adventures with maps, some of which are actually pretty good. I mean, they're mostly pretty fun, some of which are actually surprisingly good. And then it has the other handouts too. So yes, albeit that some of these products are more expensive, I don't have a price on my version of CSIO, I don't think. You've got at least a couple of them, and by that I'm thinking Rock of Baur and Waterdeep, which are just comfortably better, and not because of rocket science, but because of basic lessons about layout and ordering stuff, so things can be found quickly, which in the city game is vital. You need to be able to quickly find something out of dozens of pieces of potential information about the same area, the same topics, and that's something that In the Cage doesn't have. And it's a sign of the degeneration of TSR as a company that knew how to put together products, that you had something which not just was falling prey to metaplot and novelization and not being able to organize DM information versus player information, but also just forgotten the basic idea beyond a very bare index of making sure that people, DMs particularly, came away with the information necessary to use the product in a game. They had the examples before them, they ignored them, and that has to be, I think, seen as ultimately a failure. If you've read it or used it, please do tell me what you think in the comments. And I guess, what are your favourite Planescape products? What do you think escapes the curse of that editorial policy best? Till next time.